Hey everyone, it's TTL back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Lancool 215. Glass side panel, two 200mm fans at the front. You can change those colours as well with just the switch on the case. There we go. It was just having a funny 5 minutes. Anyway, I probably should edit that out, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be flicking through the... See, now it's working properly. But I will show you all those fans, colours and stuff later on, but... let's have a look at what you get for £62. So I always like to start at the top and at the front, and I've got the case on end. So this is the top panel of the case at the moment. Right at the front here, you can see the power switch. Then we have a reset switch. This is the switch for changing the lighting colour on the inside, which you can see me messing around with, and we will go through that in more detail in a bit. A couple of USBs there, and then a headphone microphone combo port. If we remove the magnetic dust filter, you can see a set of mounts. Now that is 120mm and 140mm, but what you can do is run your 120mm far offset if you wanted, but you can also run them there. But if you want to run a 140mm fan, they are just a single position. So you get a couple of choices of 120s and then 140s on that little extra bit, that little bit further out. So it does give you some nice options there. And then you can just simply put your magnetic dust filter back on. I personally only run the magnetic dust filters as to clean the lines up for the mesh, really, because I always have the roof exhausting personally, heat rises and all that jazz. So the front is obviously dominated by those two 200mm fans, but the Lancool logo at the bottom actually lights up the same. And when you go through, there are lots and lots of different modes that you can flick through, and you pretty much do have to go through till you find the static, and then you go through the static colours. Again, there's white. You can see the Lancool logo at the bottom changes at the same time, but if you do a long press of the button, they eventually go off. So you can completely turn the lights off as well for those of you that might want it off at night and that sort of stuff. And then you've only got to give it a flick of a switch and they come back on again. So it's nice and simple, but very limited because it doesn't actually connect to your motherboard, which I will talk to you about in more detail in a moment. And you can still remove the front, and it is just mesh. There's no dust filtering there or anything. It's just a normal mesh panel as you would expect. You can see the little light tunnel there because that is where the light comes from the bottom. Now, something I do just want to draw your attention to is when we get, because they are big fans, but if you look at the side of the case, I know the tripod's squeaking, I've got a new one on order, you can see that there is a lot of area around those fans that is just covered up, and it is both sides. So at the far left and right side of the fans, you can see that there is a fair amount of material there and restriction on those fans. And in reality, if you had the 120s or 140s in the middle, because you can see the mounts for them, there would be much clearer airflow. So you're pretty much losing that section on both sides for the airflow. Top and the bottom side is fine, it's just the left and the right. It was just something I thought that if it was going to be just a 200mm case, they could have just cut those sections out, and it feels that they've tried to accommodate too many fans and could quite possibly be hindering the airflow. Oh, come on, Tom. You can all laugh at that because I just shoved the front panel into the fans. Anyway, so that could be hindering the airflow. Round to the back of the case, you get a 120mm fan mount, which you can move the fan up and down. The reason for being able to move them up and down is you move them down if you're going to have an AIO in the roof. You need a little bit more clearance. There's no vertical mount or anything here, just some mesh. Same at the top. Normal 7-slot layout. Power supply you can only face down. It's one of the few manufacturers I still see doing it, and there is a dust filter in the bottom for it. When we can take the side panel off, they've got the kind of like cat head screws and then we can have a look around the back of the case itself. Now, you do get a couple of solid state drive mounts here, and then it's nice for a case at this price point to still have grommets. So you get a grommet here and a grommet here, and you can't see them, but there are two more on the sides. There are three cutouts down the very front of the case, which could be handy if you're going to put radiators or something like that in there. But the most important thing is the grommets are full length and hidden, and you'll be able to see those better from the other side. This here is your RGB fan controller. Now, I say fan controller because what that's really doing is powering the fans and then allowing you to change the RGB mode, because there is no actual fan speed control with it at all. The connector here just goes off to a SATA to power it. Then you have the RGB connectors on this side, and then the fan headers on this side. Now, it comes with three fans, two in the front and one in the back. It does give you another 3 slots there if you wanted. Quite handy. 2 in the roof, 1 in the back. There's already 1 in the back. I don't know where my head was going with that, but there are 3 spares. That could be handy if you were going to have an extra one in the front. Let's say 3 120s in the front, 2 120s in the top, and 1 120 in the back. So that side of it we kind of get, but there's no fan control. If you plug them in, it just goes at full speed, and that's something I found kind of strange. Now, beyond that point, on looking on the back, there are numerous tie down points. You've got some here, a string of them down there, there's some up here, there's more down the side. There's lots of tie down points for the cables. I've actually just used the 2 Velcro ones that came with the case, because I've had things in and out quite a bit, because I was trying to find out if there was a way that I could control the fans and how to change the lights. And so this has had a lot of hardware going, well, not hardware, but just stuff pulled in and out of it. So it is quite messy, but at the end of the day, the door covers it. That's absolutely fine. You get 20 millimeters of room. You can get plenty long power supplies in the bottom. As you can see, there is lots of room down in the bottom there. And there is a 3.5-inch hard drive cage down there, so you can put a mechanical hard drive in if you want, but it's also removable. So if you wanted to pull it out, maybe put a radiator in the bottom or a gigantic power supply, or just some places to hide your cables, because they're a little bit messy, like mine are with this at the moment. There is a nice full-length tempered glass and tinted window. Now, one of the things I will say straight away is when we zoom in down at the front, you can see that the power supply cover is fully perforated, which is really nice. And the hard drive cages, solid state drive cages that I did tell you about on the other side, you can mount those around here as well if you want. There is a gigantic cutout at the front of the case. Now, this would be if you're going to run radiators, and if you were going to run radiators, you take those 200mm fans out and then use a 120 or 140mm based fan mount. And I've already told you that there are the mounts for them here. I did say to you about the grommets as well, and that actually does keep things really nice and clean inside that case. So despite that cheap price tag, you do still get grommets. And I'll move some lights so that you can see slightly better, so you can see those grommets at the front and the top. You can also see that there's plenty of room above the motherboard for an AIO, because you could easily fit 120mm based AIO. So a 240 would go in the roof, and because of the offset, you'd probably be able to get away with, as long as your MOSFET heat sinks and your memory wasn't too big, you'd probably be able to get away with running push-pull in there as well. Now, on to performance. I have to admit, it didn't perform as well as I thought. One of the things I will say though is I do need to reiterate, you cannot change those fan speeds. They are fixed. There's no way for you to do it without you not using the hub in the back. And if you could technically, if you wanted to, take the front fans out of the hub, leave the RGB in it, and then wire them into the motherboard. But I've reviewed it in the way that it was sent, and it was wired up this way. So if you were going to have it at home and it got to the point where you wanted to quieten it down, or, you know, for that sort of thing, then that's what you're going to have to do. I would probably suggest playing around with some fan splitters and trying different headers on your motherboard, because you're going to want the 200mm fans wired in separately to the 120mm that's in the back. So there's a little bit of advice for you. The graphs, again, it didn't particularly do as well as I was expecting. I do think that it would probably perform better with 120mm or 140mm in the front, because you wouldn't have that big section that is basically covered up. But what we do need to remember with this case is those two 200mm fans do actually look pretty good, and it gives a lot of light. It's a distinctive look, and at the end of the day the case is £62. You do get two giant RGB fans. I mean, with all due respect, if this was a Corsair case with 120mm in the front, you'd probably be looking at least £30 more. So I think they've done quite well on a budget. It's got a couple of caveats, and this is where my conclusion kind of like neatly kind of flows in. And I would give it a value for money award, because I think for £60 you do get an awful lot of case. You just have to keep in mind that yes, it's an airflow case, but there's not actually a massive amount of airflow going on in the front. And those 200mm are really, in my opinion, just for looks more than anything else. If you did want to use it and put your own fans in, then it will do. There's no restriction in the front, and I think you'll do really well. I also think that it might do a little bit better if it had some extra exhaust and stuff going on. So adding fans to it, building the system in there, would probably do it quite well. But to get the bulk of the air through the front of the case, I think you are going to need to go down to a couple of 140mm fans maybe. But value for money, because it's cheap and there's nothing glaringly wrong with it. It's just a couple of little annoying things. A, like I said, can't control the fan speeds. And then B, the way that things were set up with that fan splitter and stuff. I think it probably would have been better in the long run if they'd have used that more as a RGB hub, rather than trying to, get people to direct fans into it. Because in 2020, I think there should have been like a PWM header come off of it, or something to go onto a motherboard, so that it could have mimicked the fan speeds. Again, I understand why it doesn't, because you've got two 200mm in the front and 120mm in the back, and unless they were exactly the same RPMs, you could run into some conflicts when you started to turn the fan speeds down. So, pretty quick one, but at the end of the day, cracking little case for the money. It's just a shame, that it fell over on those minor points. But for a tempered glass case that looks like that, and you don't need an RGB motherboard, that's something else to keep in mind, is that you can actually, if you want, just change the colours via the switch, like I showed you before, and it's working quicker now, but it's you can change the colours as you wish via that switch. You don't need to have expensive hardware. It could be a great upgrade for someone with some older kit. Maybe if you have a son or something and you're trying to smarten his room up for his birthday or something like that, it's a great £60 purchase. Hence the Value for Money Award. Tiny Tom Logan out. Ding! Love you, sis.